Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a heartfelt story about Uri, a powerful CEO who seems to have everything, and Tu Tieu, a woman of strength and quiet grace who must choose between love and independence. Together, they face questions of destiny, sacrifice, and whether true love can really conquer it all. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss any of our upcoming episodes. Uri stood by the window, silent, his eyes drifting toward the last colors of the evening sky. The office around him was quiet, except for the soft rustling of leaves brushing against the glass. Behind him, in the faint light, Tu Tieu lay on the bed. Her face carried exhaustion, mixed with a subtle trace of pain. Even without words, the battle she was fighting was clear, and Uri could feel the weight of it pressing against his own chest. He walked into the room, his presence as gentle as a whisper. Without saying anything, he moved closer to her side and slowly placed his hand against her forehead. A simple gesture, yet one filled with everything he couldn't put into words. "Does it still hurt?" Uri's voice was soft, almost trembling. His eyes searched hers, desperate for any sign of relief, something to calm the unease gnawing inside him. Tu Tieu's gaze flickered before she gave a faint nod. A small, fragile smile tugged at her lips. "It's better now. Just a little more time. That's all I need." Her words were meant to comfort him, but Uri could see through them. The pain wasn't just physical. It was the invisible burden she'd carried for so long. A life lived on her own, with no one to lean on. She looked up at him, and in that quiet moment, something unspoken passed between them. She didn't need him to solve everything. She just needed him to be there. His presence alone was enough. "Is there anything you need?" His voice trembled with concern. But Tu Tieu didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her eyes told him everything. Sometimes, the greatest gift was simply someone who stayed. The room settled into silence again, the hum of the evening wrapping gently around them. Yet Uri felt a quiet unrest brewing beneath the stillness. Sitting at the edge of the bed, he studied Tu Tieu's tired face. Something hung heavy in the air between them. Something unspoken. Something that felt like the calm before a storm. Then with trembling hands, Tu Tieu picked up a folded letter resting in her lap. She had written it earlier that day, but holding it now made the weight of her decision almost unbearable. "Uri," she began, her voice soft but steady. "The time has come. I think I need to go. I need to find a new job, somewhere I can stand on my own." Uri's heart clenched at her words. Though he'd sensed this coming, the distance in her gaze, the hesitation in her movements, the reality still cut deep. "Why?" His voice broke, barely above a whisper. His eyes searched hers, hoping for a crack of hesitation, a sign she didn't truly mean it. But Tu Tieu lowered her head, her breath shaky. "Because I don't want to keep depending on you. You've already done so much for me, Uri. I can't keep relying on your kindness. I need to stand on my own 2 feet." The words hit him like a blade. Uri wanted to beg her to stay, to tell her she didn't need to face everything alone. But deep down, he knew this wasn't about him. It was about her. She needed this for herself. Slowly, he nodded. He reached for her hand, his touch gentle, filled with every unsaid word. "If that's what you need, then go. But please, don't forget, I'll always be here, no matter where you are." Tu Tieu blinked through her tears, gave his hand one last squeeze, and quietly stood to pack her things. Uri watched her leave, his heart torn between love and the painful acceptance of her choice. The following morning was sharp and crisp, mirroring Uri's restless thoughts. He sat at his desk, papers blurred before his eyes, his mind wandering endlessly to Tu Tieu, her smile, her resilience, the softness in her eyes when she looked at him. She had left the night before, not without a trace, but with the kind of silence that meant nothing would ever be the same. Loneliness crept into Uri's chest. His fingers hovered over his phone, lingering above her contact. He longed to call her, to hear her voice, to ask if she was safe, but he couldn't. She needed space, freedom, a chance to prove to herself that she could stand alone. He had to respect that. Still, the memories flooded him. Her laugh filling the room, the nights they'd stayed up, talking about everything and nothing. The way she made him feel seen in a world where no one truly understood him. Now, all of that felt like an unfinished sentence. A knock at the door pulled him back. His assistant stepped in, reminding him of the next meeting. Uri nodded absently, pushing the thoughts aside, but they lingered like shadows he couldn't shake. It was then, sitting alone in his office, that Uri finally admitted the truth to himself. He loved her. He had already fallen, and there was no turning back. The question wasn't whether he loved her. The question was, would she ever come back? By evening, his resolve hardened. He couldn't sit still any longer. He needed to see her, to tell her what had been burning in his chest all along. The night was quiet as Uri drove toward Tu Tieu's farm. The familiar road stretched before him, but tonight it felt like a journey into the unknown. His hands gripped the wheel tightly, knuckles pale. He didn't know what would happen when he saw her. Would she still care? Or had she already closed the door between them? When he arrived, uncertainty hung heavy in the air. He stepped out of the car, his breath shallow, and walked to her front door. For a moment, he froze, hand hovering above the knob. Then, gathering his courage, he knocked. Softly, as if afraid the sound might shatter the fragile hope he carried. The door opened. Tu Tieu stood there. For a moment, neither spoke. Tension filled the air, weighted by everything left unsaid. Her eyes met his, surprise flickering, but beneath it, something deeper. Something that mirrored the turmoil inside him. Uri was the first to break the silence. His voice was quiet, but steady. Tu Tieu, I've been thinking about you all day, about us, and I can't let you walk away without telling you this. I love you. Tu Tieu's eyes widened, surprise flashing across her face. For a heartbeat, Uri feared his confession had been too much, too sudden. The silence stretched, heavy and fragile, until her lips parted and she let out a trembling breath. I've been thinking about you too, Uri. I didn't want to leave. I thought I had to. Relief surged through Uri's chest, almost overwhelming. He stepped closer, his heart pounding with every word. You don't have to leave. Not anymore. Let me be there for you. Let me help you. Let's face everything together. The stillness between them carried the weight of everything unspoken. Tu Tieu's eyes softened, tears threatening to spill as she whispered, "Okay, Uri, I'll stay, but only if you promise me one thing." Uri's breath caught. Anything. She gave him a small, determined smile. Promise me we'll build a future together, one filled with love, not just an attempt to fix the past. Uri reached out, taking her hand as if anchoring himself to the moment. His voice was steady, filled with quiet devotion. I promise. And in that promise, everything shifted. The pain of the past began to fade, replaced by the fragile glow of something new, something worth holding on to. The next morning, as dawn crept across the horizon, Uri and Tu Tieu sat together in the small garden outside her farmhouse. The crisp air was scented with dew and soil, wrapping them in stillness. For the first time in a long time, Uri felt as though the world had paused, just for them. He glanced at Tu Tieu. Her gaze was fixed on the flowers blooming at her feet, her expression softer than he'd ever seen. She wasn't just surviving anymore. There was peace in her eyes. I used to believe I had to do everything alone, she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of years. But when you told me you loved me, Uri, it made me realize I don't. I can share the journey. I don't have to carry it all by myself. Uri gently took her hand, his thumb brushing against her skin. You never have to do anything alone again, Tu Tieu. Not as long as I'm here. Her eyes lifted to his, and in that glance was a lifetime of hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to see not just him, but the life they could build together, the laughter, the struggles, the quiet moments like this one. What if we build something beautiful together? She asked softly, her voice trembling with both fear and hope. Uri's heart swelled. He squeezed her hand gently, a smile breaking across his face. I think we already are. The warmth between them grew, not just from the rising sun, but from the love forming its roots deep inside them. Their journey was only beginning, but for the first time, it truly felt possible. Weeks passed. Uri and Tu Tieu worked side by side, building a life piece by piece. Their days were filled with small joys, planting in the garden, cooking meals together, sharing quiet evenings under the stars. The tension that once haunted their every interaction slowly melted away, replaced by a steady rhythm of trust and affection. But inside Uri's heart, something stirred. As much as he cherished their daily life, he knew he wanted more than promises whispered in the dark. He wanted something lasting, something permanent, a vow that could not be broken. It was time to ask her the question that had been on his mind for weeks. One evening, as the sky blazed with golden light, Uri decided the moment had come. He had planned carefully, choosing the small garden where they had shared so many turning points in their journey. Tu Tieu was bent over her flowers, her hands tenderly brushing soil from the leaves. Uri watched her quietly, overwhelmed by love. She was his anchor, his equal, his heart. Taking a steadying breath, Uri stepped forward. Tu Tieu. She looked up, her eyes warm with curiosity. What is it? Uri dropped to one knee, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. The world seemed to still around them. Opening the box, he revealed a delicate ring that sparkled in the fading sunlight. His voice shook with emotion. I don't just want to spend my life with you. I want to promise you that we'll face everything together. Tu Tieu, will you marry me? For a long moment, she didn't move. Her eyes widened, tears brimming as her breath caught in her throat. Uri's heart raced, waiting, praying. Then with a trembling smile, she whispered, Yes, Uri. Yes, I'll marry you. Relief and joy flooded through him. Sliding the ring onto her finger, Uri rose, pulling her into his arms. Their lips met in a kiss that sealed their promise, a vow that no fear or distance could undo. The morning after the proposal felt like a new beginning. Uri woke early, the first rays of sunlight spilling across the room. For once, his chest wasn't heavy with longing or worry. Instead, joy filled every part of him. Beside him, Tu Tieu slept peacefully, her face relaxed in the rare stillness of pure contentment. Uri watched her, his heart swelling. She had said yes. She was his future. Reaching over, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. She stirred, eyes blinking open slowly. When her gaze met his, something unspoken passed between them, an understanding deeper than words. "Good morning," she whispered, her voice soft with sleep. "Good morning," Uri replied, smiling. The joy of their new beginning radiated from him. "I've been thinking. I can't wait for this new chapter with you. I want to build something beautiful every single day." Tu Tieu sat up, her smile gentle but sure. "Me too. It feels like everything has led us here. We've both fought so much. But now, Uri, I feel like we're finally where we're meant to be." Their fingers intertwined, grounding them in the moment. The love between them no longer felt fragile. It was strong, steady, something real, something they could trust. Outside, the world stirred awake. But inside, they had found their home in each other. And so, their journey continued, not with uncertainty, but with the quiet confidence of two hearts beating as one. They had faced fear, distance, and doubt, and still chosen each other. For Uri and Tu Tieu, this was only the beginning. Uri, a successful CEO, appears to have everything but love. Tu Tieu, a woman of quiet strength, struggles between her longing for independence and the undeniable pull of her emotions. Their story begins in silence and pain, as Uri cares for her while she wrestles with the decision to leave. Determined to stand on her own, Tu Tieu walks away, but Uri cannot let go. He follows his heart, confessing his love at her doorstep. Moved by his sincerity, she agrees to stay, with one condition. They must build a future rooted in love, not the past. Days turn into weeks as they grow closer, until Uri kneels in the garden and proposes. With tears of joy, Tu Tieu says yes, and together they begin a new chapter. One filled with trust, hope, and the promise of forever.